He's commemorating the life and times of struggle activist Solomon Mahlangu, who's convicted of common purpose murder under the apartheid government and hanged in 1979. ANC bigwigs are there now. We can see Esma Khashule. Let's quickly hop over to our reporter, Kaya, who's standing by.
Remember Comrade Solomon Mahlangu and many who laid down their lives for our freedom. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure what to add, except to say that I think any person who advocates for the death penalty should spend just the time we spent here today to bring home the reality of the brutality of the state being a killer. But also to say a lot of people who were hanged on the principle of collective guilt, a subject in law that is still very, very obscure. This notion of collective guilt and the non-subject and the inability to be subjective of a legal system that looked at everybody from the viewpoint of political eyes. And the age, if one looks at on the plaques on the wall, the average age, the youngest I saw was 19, the eldest was 64, but the average age was between 22 and 28. If one looked at the plaques on the wall. And that is really the story about the death penalty is who will die. Young and black will die. And I think that the course that the South African government has taken for rehabilitation is the correct one, even though it is a difficult course to take because of the anger of our people. But remember, the apartheid regime did not only legally kill people, they also killed people illegally in many different ways. And as Comrade Paul says, lest we forget where we come from, this is a moment that reminds us so brutally of the time that we come from and why we can't take the freedoms that we have for granted. No matter how angry we are, how upset we are, the freedoms we have came at a huge price to families, like the Mahlangu family, the Shabangu family. I just saw on the name of somebody I actually knew, Benjamin Moloisi. His mother's name was Pauline Moloisi. She was a member of the Federation of Transvaal Women. And how we always tried to beg and plead for the lives of people. We never succeeded. There was always a no. Priscilla Jana recounts the last moments she had with Kalushi, and how sad that was for her as a lawyer, to look into the eyes of a young person who knew there was nothing else was going to work and that he had to walk those 52 steps. So I think that's what this day is really about, is remembering where we come from and not taking it for granted. And for the ANC cadres out there, this is a time to strengthen our movement so that we remember what we are and who we are and who we represent, the poorest of the poor, the people who really suffer and the people who really need transformation, economic upliftment, the reconstruction of our economy and the revival of our organization, and that's what we are determined to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Questions, guys?
Thanks. We're proceeding to Mamelodi. They have another part of the program.
Your colleague is in pain.
Okay, so there you have it, Jane. I mean, obviously quite a very solemn moment here as the governing party remembers one of its stalwarts. And of course, I'm going to try and see if we can speak to the Treasurer General of the party. So thank you so much indeed, sir, for your time. Quite a very critical moment as the governing party is reminiscing about one of your foremost stalwarts, who paid a supreme price. What does it mean for the ANC?
As we just said now, that for us, this is a day when we remind ourselves of the great costs that we got our freedom. Comrade Solomon Mahlangu was hanged in this facility on the 6th of April. And that's why we come here to remind ourselves that we are free today, but this freedom came at a great cost. Comrades lost their lives, not only solely, but as you can see when you walk in that facility, Solodi and many others were also hanged in this facility. So we just want to say to many of our people out there, particularly cadres of the ANC, that they must appreciate the freedom that we have today. Let's use a day like the 6th of April as a day that reminds us that let's not take this freedom for granted. Let's continue to work for our people, make sure they all have a better life, because that's what Comrade Soli died for, with many who were executed here. They were fighting for freedom, and they were not criminals, they were freedom fighters. They wanted our people to be free, our people to have equal rights, our people to have a better life. That's the commitment that we're going to continue on as cadres of the African National Congress and many in the progressive movement, to continue to fight for those ideals. So today we are here, we are recharging ourselves, so to speak, to continue to walk this journey that these gallant fighters walked in the past years. There's still a lot to be done to make sure that our people indeed get a better life.
And of course, TG, I would imagine recharging yourself would also mean deal with the litany of issues that you face within the ANC, the issues surrounding the Secretary General, the consultations around the 30-day period. Are you able to give us an indication as to how that process is unfolding?
Well, as we said in the last NEC, that we always in the ANC make sure that there is fairness in everything we do. When we unveiled the guidelines that we unveiled, we have sent them to provincial structures of the organization for them to go through them, and we believe that there may well be inputs that we will receive as feedback from structures of the organization that we will include in that document. When the NEC adopted the guidelines, they said it's a living document. In other words, it will be refined as we go on. So we will get feedback from our structures and we will refine the document as we go on. And other challenges that we are dealing with, we're giving them time to go through them, consult, and so on. So with time, the NEC will finalize these matters. So there is no rush. We have to do things properly, follow our constitution, follow the guidelines, but make sure that those who are alleged to have been involved in wrongdoing or are charged for particular crimes, they must also feel that there is fairness in the organization when we look at these allegations against them. There must be no rush to put people out of the ANC or suspend people. Comrades must feel that I have been heard, my issues have been dealt properly before any decision is taken, and I think that's what we are doing.
Another issue around the fight back, TG, of course there are those who are planning now the national shutdowns and calling for the current head of state to step aside as well. Is there any concern about that?
No, I look at those things as just rumors. We don't have any evidence of any meeting that is planning those things. So we're not particularly concerned about that. I think there's a lot of discipline in the ANC, and the cadres of the ANC know that things must be done in a proper way. So if anybody goes and plans a shutdown, etc., it will be ill-discipline, really. But for now, we're not concerned about that. We think the process that we put in place are unfolding in a way that we think it's fair, in a way that we believe that once we conclude those processes, nobody will complain that
and will the NEC act?
I've been treated unfairly.
Will the NEC act against those ill-discipline?
Well, the constitution of the ANC provides guidelines on what to do. So let's allow the ANC space to look at these matters carefully and ensure that it does everything according to its constitution.
All right, thank you so much indeed. That's, of course, the ANC Treasurer General. And, of course, I mean, it's quite a very solemn occasion here. And, of course, he just spoke a lot about a lot of issues facing the governing party, the issues surrounding the Secretary General of the ANC, Kgosi Mahlangu, of course, calling for the fairness. And also, we saw the concerning reports that there was a fight-back campaign from those who are aligned to Mr. Mahlangu. So once again, the TG speaking about the issue of making sure that issues around ill-discipline are tackled within the ANC.
I mean, that sounds good, doesn't it, Kai? I mean, certainly the high command there. We had Jesse Duarte speaking a little bit earlier on. I saw a flash of glasses and I thought that was ace, but it was actually the Pule Mabe, the spokesperson. Also Ronald Lamola, the Justice Minister there. What else is planned today? And just remind us how important the place is where you are now, what the symbolism is considering some of the horrors that happened there.
Well, that's right, Jane. So this is a home where a lot of people were killed by the apartheid regime. So this is where quite a number of the freedom fighters were hanged, the likes of Solomon Mahlangu. And he was one of the youngest martyrs to be hanged here. But also, apart from that, now there's quite a lot of history that is attached into this particular place now. It's serving as a museum to really remind South Africans about the very ugly chapter that once graced our shores, but also most importantly, the members of Mahlangu now will have an opportunity alongside the ANC heavyweights to also go for a wreath laying in Mamelodi, just east of Pretoria, not far from here, just a few kilometers away from here. But it's quite a very important place, especially because in South Africa's context, Jane, we know that capital punishment was abolished with the advent of democracy, with us espousing a number of values and making sure that we live up to a number of issues that we do aspire to see our people. But a very important element here, Jane, is the name Solomon Mahlangu is very important in South Africa. You go back to the Fees Must Fall protest. Students were chanting this name and saying the fees must drop because they were facing exorbitant tuition fees.
Right. Kylie Kamola, thank you for that update.